Would I consider what just happened to Cosmos to be decent news? Arguably, I would say yes, even though nothing I say is financial advice. And what is that? Not too long ago, Cosmos, they made a post talking about how IBC interoperability, now IBC, by the way, stands for Inter-Blockchain Communication Protocol, but besides that point, again, IBC interoperability is now available on Unichain through something called Toki. Now, people may be thinking, okay, why does this even matter? Because if we take a look at, for instance, something like Unichain, it is allegedly the layer 2 that is designed for DeFi, and it's actually by something called Uniswap, right? And if we take a look at Uniswap within that specific realm of, DeFi, it is very popular in the grand scheme of things. And then in terms of a DEX, right, a DEX, it is actually considered to be the most popular one out there. So even besides that, though, if we take a look at Unichain, actually it's built on the superchain, and then we take a look at Optimism and the aspects of that when it comes to superchain, and then Optimism is a layer 2. And then if we take a look at something like Optimism, it actually helped build Coinbase's layer 2 called Base. But yeah, besides that point though, to just kind of explain this real quick, the reason why I think this is pretty impressive is because if we take a look at a layer 2 by nature, in this instance, right, if we take a look at a layer 2 for Ethereum, let's say, it basically kind of allows Ethereum to be enjoyed while at the same time not necessarily having to deal with some of the drawbacks, like for instance, the kind of gas fee issues, which I do see arguably, and also when I take a look at the arguable scalability issues. But yeah, besides that point, when I take a look at Cosmos, I feel like this is pretty cool because in the grand scheme of things, when I take a look at something like Cosmos, people like to say, oh, no one really cares about and all this type of stuff. Well, the thing is, they cannot, I think, realistically, right? This is just my point of view, or just let alone for a lot of other projects out there. I don't know if it's even feasible to have a new partnership every single day. So when sometimes people like to tell me, oh, why isn't this project updating and all this? Well, because how are they going to do that if they're not having a new partnership or something that's going on? Like, literally, like sometimes I don't know if it's even possible to, have a new partnership every single day. So when I see something like this, I do find it pretty interesting because I think by basically IBC, which is, by the way, let me explain what this is, right? IBC is the glue, so to speak, that connects all of these Cosmos-based blockchains. For instance, if we take a look at some examples of a Cosmos-based blockchain, we take a look at the BNB chain, we take a look at Cronos. However, again, historically, I've seen like over 50 Cosmos-based blockchains. So this is, I think, is a pretty cool thing actually in the grand scheme of things when it comes to something like Cosmos. Because if we consider, right, even despite Atom, which is the native token of Cosmos, being around 22 times lower than $50, it's clearly not doing the best, but I'm just saying, even despite all that, we have to consider just kind of what Cosmos has been able to do historically speaking. Again, over 50 Cosmos-based blockchains, that's pretty impressive. Now, to just give kind of a quick recap on Cosmos, in case someone is wondering, okay, what is kind of the Cosmos vibe, basically, when it comes to this? Now, Cosmos, if we take a look at it, right, basically, the Cosmos blockchain uses a consensus algorithm called Tendermint. However, Tendermint actually created a toolkit called the Cosmos SDK, and SDK stands for Software Development Kit, and that allows for application-specific blockchains, in which case we see a lot of Cosmos-based blockchains out there, like for instance, again, like I mentioned before, BNB chain, something like Cronos, but again, there's like a bunch, but I'm just saying. And yeah, that's just kind of how it relates to IBC before, the Inter-Blockchain Communication Protocol, which I already kind of explained, right? But I'm just saying, again, besides all that, I feel like the utility when it comes to this is pretty interesting to me, even though I can't speak on anyone's behalf. But sometimes people like to tell me, oh, Cosmos, it's going to get left behind because there's so many blockchains out there and all this. But then here's the thing. If basically the way you take a look at it, if there is the Cosmos SDK, which basically allows for application-specific blockchains to be built. I'm not saying every single new one is going to automatically choose that, but I'm just saying, if it's actually helping, hypothetically, maybe some new blockchains out there that might appear moving forward, who knows, why would it be bad if there's more of what it's trying to help? You know what I mean? It's like, for instance, let's say I am, the owner of a car dealership. If let's say there's more individuals in the area wanting to purchase vehicles, would I complain about that? Like, I don't know if I would actually, but I'm just saying, that's even besides the point though. When I take a look at something like, Atom, people like to say, oh, no one really cares about it because take a look at the market cap and all this. Yeah, I get it, but at the same time, I think sometimes it kind of showcases that even with Cosmos being fundamentally the way it is, if the altcoin space isn't doing the best, Atom just simply sometimes is not going to do the best either. But it's the altcoin space. What can I do about it? I cannot control this, right? I don't have any sort of capabilities to do that. The only thing I can do is just wait, and that's pretty much about it, I guess. But again, people like to say, oh, isn't that kind of boring? Well, what else can I do? You know what I mean? Like, if I found it to be so boring, I could easily leave the space, but I clearly don't want to do that. Now, the reason why I don't want to do that, even though I'm not telling anyone to do anything, is just because I don't think I've seen an altcoin season during this cycle. So, yeah, I just don't want to leave. But yeah, that's besides the point, though. When I take a look at something like Cosmos, again, overall, I find this to be pretty interesting because as of late, I mean, there hasn't really been much talk when it comes to Cosmos, right? Or should I say a lot of talk when it comes to things regarding Cosmos, which is, or should I say kind of a lot of discussions, right, regarding Cosmos, which isn't necessarily that surprising. I mean, first of all, it's kind of like a perfect combination of the altcoin space not doing the best, and then Atom was also not doing the best, and then also Cosmos really hasn't had that many new partnerships as of late. So it's basically sort of this recipe that made it not really talked about that much. But you know what? I still want to talk about it because I feel like it's pretty cool what just happened. A lot of my friends out there don't really care, but I care at least. Now, granted though, had they did this or not, like it would not make me like Cosmos more or less. You know what I mean? Like if let's say this never happened, first of all, it's not something I would ever even think about. And then second of all, it does not make me like Cosmos more or less. It's just basically still the same as what it once was because I am still holding Cosmos. Personally for me, I'm not telling anyone to do anything, but I am dollar cost averaging once a month. This news that just came out when it comes to Cosmos, it will not make me do that more or less. You know what I mean? I'm still just dollar cost averaging once a month, and that's pretty much about it. But in the meantime, I do want to talk about this because I found it to be pretty cool nonetheless. I found it to be decent news because when I take a look at something like, again, Cosmos, I feel like despite its historical, things that it did, sometimes it's not really considered because the price hypothetically is just not looking good whatsoever. But in the meantime, though, I just still wanted to talk about this real quick to just kind of give my updated thoughts when it comes to Cosmos because I haven't made a video when it comes to Cosmos in quite a while. But actually, I have not forgotten about Cosmos. But it's just, what can I do if there's no updates and all this type of stuff? What can I do, right? So when I see something like this, I do want to talk about it. Thank you for watching. I hope you all have a nice day. It's Willie the Captain, and I'll catch you all on the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.